All right, let's go to our next section. Again, this is one that uh, Wigley misses, and I think it's very, very important in an examination of the American way of war. Um, Americans have a unique genius when it comes to organization. If you look at McDonald's up here, McDonald's never invented the hamburger. What they did is organize a different way to market it. Walmart certainly didn't invent retail sales and department stores, but it certainly changed the way in which it's done. And Amazon, Bezos didn't invent a freaking thing except a better way to organize and to deliver products. And it's astonishing to me. I just ordered something a couple of hours ago, and it should be here in about 10 hours. An unbelievable accomplishment. So, where did this come from, and why is it important? Look here. Here is a figure you should recognize. This is Thomas Edison holding up his electric light bulb, and we all revel in the fact that he invented the light bulb. What is less reported, yet more important, is what was important in what he did is not the light bulb, it's how he invented the light bulb. It's the organizational innovations that he made. Fundamentally, what he did is he invented the R&D, or research and development, that now predominates, and now with the boom of AI, uh, research and development is going on at an insane clip. Uh, but his organizational innovations set the stage for the rest of life. And for some reason, Americans are particularly genius at the doing of this. In fact, people are pouring in from all over the world uh, to come to America because the ease of being able to flourish in a situation like this. And so uh, the organization of Menlo Park, orchestration, this is a great term to use for it, the orchestration of minds, tools, technology, processes, and the rapid iteration, the repeating of it until you find something that was successful. I forget how many items he used before he got the right thing to use in the light bulb as the filament. What is going to bring enormous change with AI now is that robots are going to be doing this iteration, and they're going to be able to working around the clock, and the discoveries in medicine will be extraordinary. And so the backbone of American technological power is R&D. And here during World War II, Bush developed what was called the Office of Scientific Research and Development, and they developed the penicillin. Was one of the many products that they came out with. The assumption is that penicillin probably saved 100,000 American GI lives during the course of the war. So if you look at the Battle of the Atlantic, the technology that went into it, the organization of it was extraordinary. So the very fact that they were using data to analyze where the German boats were attacking, the organization of hunter-killer squadrons, of the baby carrier destroyers, destroyer escorts, patrol ships, and then the massive listening to German radio traffic and analyzing that. All of this is an organizational masterpiece. We've already mentioned the Red Ball Express. When Patton breaks out here and sweeps across Europe, we built up huge supplies of petrol of logistics. Pluto, the oil pipelines are coming in right here, but he goes so far so fast that he runs out of there. So they organize a Red Ball Express, and basically it just is a convoy system that is going to run around the clock, incredibly well organized to get it through. In fact, the guy who organized it went home after the war and organized a trucking firm that used the same technology. So this was incredibly important in what is going on there. Our organizational genius is a secret sauce in developing and explaining Americans. All right, we're going to end that session there. And the next one we're going to talk about is, again, another major innovation in America that is too under examined. Another avenue of the American military that Wigley totally failed to recognize as an enormous strength was the American military education system, or schooling system. It started very, very early and was incredibly important in the growth of the American military. Again, we can talk about it as a secret sauce of what goes on. So you have at Command and General Staff College at Leavenworth in Kansas, where officers are taught critical thinking, operational level operations, and then an advanced school at the U.S. Army War College. Originally was in Washington and then moved to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And again, they're given a senior set of leaders are brought in and given a different set of perspectives, dealing with all levels of staff operation. And again, the Naval War College is also set up at Newport, tremendously important in the success of the American military. These come from a recognition that the Spanish-American War indicated significant weaknesses in the American military, incredible lack of staff, poor logistics. What Teddy Roosevelt did as an officer in this war was an incredible example of the inefficiency of going forward. He literally, Teddy Roosevelt, to get his troops to Cuba, he literally stole a ship and took off on his own, and act incredibly. So Eli Root, the Secretary of War, wanted to deal with strategy, war planning, the international questions, mobilization, and cooperation between the branches, and to talk about industrial and manpower needs as well. Command and General Staff is set up in Leavenworth, and at the turn of the century it goes through an enormous change, and indeed it utilizes and comes in at the same time as John Dewey in progressive education, and changes the entire concept of how to teach. What you'll get from some that at West Point cadets would be taught with rote memorization and recitation in class, and in map reading classes they would memorize instructions. What Morrison, who was the major change agent at Leavenworth, did is they'd give the students a map and say, here, go out in the field and find position A, B, and C. So really hands-on operation, and a very, very different type of thinking. It had an enormous impact, and this is George Marshall here, and George Marshall is one of the many graduates of Command and General Staff, and he tells in his works that Leavenworth taught him how to think. So tremendous impact of what goes on. Very, very distinctive to the Americans, and what does. It was very large. It didn't just take a handful of elites. It took a large number of people, and it worked with well-organized staff work. They're bringing in some of the ideas from modern corporations, and they're bringing in cohorts of trained staffed officers, and they're bringing in large numbers of them, so that when corps groups were formed and army level operations were formed, they had people who had some training in staff organization, and when they talked to combined arms and logistics and integration of air and ground, there was some training in this, education in this. I don't even like the word training. I prefer the word education and schooling. But a tremendous impact. G. Lawton Collins, who commanded the 7th Corps in Normandy, talked to how much he praised the system. And he talks about how the Corps headquarters he set up was fundamentally patterned after what he had learned at Leavenworth. So an enormous impact on what goes on. Quesada, who we've talked about, who was the enormous innovative leader of close air combat and close air support and the organization of integration, that of integrating the Air Force, working with the infantry and working with armor, the whole development of forward air control as it developed under him. He credits back to organizational ideas and integration of staff work at Leavenworth. If you look at this chart, you'll see that Command and General Staff, 33 of the Corps commanders had graduated from Leavenworth. 29 of 34 had graduated from Carlisle. Command the War College. The War College at that point was in D.C. rather than in Carlisle. But again, look at the sizes of these. Interestingly enough, Eisenhower graduated kind of in a midland position at West Point, but he was top of his class at Leavenworth, and that may have been where Marshall first noticed him. In contrast, the Soviet example is shockingly different. The numbers of their officers that come from the advanced schooling that they'd set up was much, much less than what the American experience was. Now, part of this is because Stalin purged so many in the 30s that they weren't there, and so many came up through the ranks. If you look at this picture here of the Corps numbers of graduating, you'll see the numbers are much less than what we showed before with the Command and General Staff. And here's what happened in the Soviet military under Stalin before World War II. Here you see the 5 marshals that were leading the Soviet army after the Civil War, primarily the winners of the Soviet Civil War. Tukhachevsky, the man in the center here, is the man who came up with the idea and popularized the idea and trained the idea of deep operations, what we just talked about in the planning that Roskomkowski did in the Battle of Bagration. And he, of course, is executed by Stalin. Stalin did not tolerate anyone that had a large popularity and was seen as a leading force. Now, the 3 on top here were all executed and purged and executed. And here you have Voroshilov and Boudini, and it is reported, I can't find confirmation of it, is that Voroshilov said to Boudini, "Don't worry, they're only killing the smart ones," basically meaning that he is safe. And Voroshilov, I believe, was put in charge of the Finnish War and did an absolutely horrible job in what went on with that. So the schooling is very, very important. And now we can jump to a kind of a conclusion as to how this all ended up. And here you see the Normandy invasion force of Operation Overlord. You see this was Patton's breakdown here, and here's Patton's surrounding the German forces at the Falaise pocket and tremendous destruction to those German forces there. And here you see again Operation Bagration, the deep penetrations that they made, the double envelopments that they do, and the drive so very, very fast right to the river facing Warsaw, where they pause. So the German consequences here are quite extraordinary. So the Allied forces in Overlord destroy almost 300,000 Germans. The Soviets destroy more than that, almost 400 to 450,000. Army Group B in the West is totally destroyed. Army Group Center, 28 out of 34 divisions are fundamentally destroyed. So the destruction to German forces on both fronts was catastrophic to the Germans. So as you can anticipate, not only were the losses enormous as to the men, but the equipment loss was also absolutely catastrophic. With the transportation and the petroleum campaign of the 8th Air Force, the Germans have enormous difficulty getting any returns to the front. So look at those numbers of aircraft that are destroyed. And later in the war, the P-47s are attacking the Luftwaffe on the ground as they return from escorting B-17s to German subjects. So the combination of these two battles basically puts Germany into the worst situation of a two-front war that will become the destruction of them in a very, very short period of time. They will lose out and be annihilated. What we're going to be looking at next is going to be a comparison of the siege of Yorktown and the siege of Toulon in France, comparing the military action of Washington to the military action of Napoleon. So we'll be comparing Washington at the very young period, in Washington at the mature period and last battle of his life, and Napoleon as a 23-year-old man beginning his career as a leader of French forces. So that'll be our next chapter in this review.